about the New York mayoral election. And every time I bring it up with my coworkers, they say, oh, that's New York. You can't win on those politics in Iowa. But are there any like national takeaways that we can, hold on to even here in Iowa?
Sure. And I think maybe it's like a meta issue. It's not just affordability. It's not just Palestine. It's not just what it is that this was an authentic person who, when you heard him speak, when he walked through neighborhoods, as Ed Koch did back when he was mayor, how am I doing, he'd say. I mean, Zohran went into the Bronx. He went into Staten Island. He went into Brooklyn. He went to Queens. He talked to people. And I think New Yorkers found him a refreshing and authentic voice who, yes, said things that they wanted to hear about affordability. But when the tough questions came, do you remember the cartoon characters Tweety and Sylvester? Right? The scene where Sylvester was like looking at Tweety Bird, and there's the little Sylvester on this side saying, you got to go get him and do whatever, spit him up and chew him. And then the other one is saying, no, he's a nice little bird. Most politicians operate that way. When you see them in a debate taking a tough question, you can see the eyes roll back in the head for a minute with the, Zohran his eyes never rolled back in his head. I mean, he took tough questions, it was who he was. And I think people saw the authenticity there. So I think, because I know, actually, I'm going to be bold enough to say, I know most members of Congress are pro-Palestinian. They are members of what I call back during the Cold War, the Pope used to name cardinals behind the Iron Curtain, and he would name them, the Latin he'd use was in our heart. He wouldn't really reveal their names so they wouldn't be persecuted. So I have a club in my heart of members of Congress who would say to me, I'm really with you guys, but I just can't do it because, I got a whatever, It will be, I think, easier for them to be with us guys in public now, after Zohran. It'll be easier for them to be authentic. Because that was, I think, to me, the one takeaway from his election wasn't just the issues, it was how authentic he was, how real he was. And people, they liked him. Doesn't hurt to be likable, but you can be likable and still not authentic, but he was. Didn't hurt that he ran against Andrew Cuomo. But yeah, I think that would be, being honest and being authentic are absolutely critical.
Hi, my name's Aaron. So you touched on sort of the culture and political shifts that have made Zionism less tenable in American politics. What about the sort of like more hegemonic sort of projection of power within the region and a hedge against Iran and all that? Do you see any of those aspects of, like American support of Israel shifting at all?
What's the word? Poppycock? I mean, there is that language that comes from the blob, as Ben Rhodes would call them. I love it that the networks have this stable of political analysts on the Middle East, and they'll start with, he has served in the last 5 administrations advisors on the Israeli-Palestine. Well, shit, if you've been an advisor for the last 5 administrations and we are where we are, you shouldn't be on anything, talking about anything right now. But that's the language that's the blob. We have to have a hedge against Iran, and we have to whatever, and it's a stable blah, blah, blah. I mean, think about it for a minute. Israel does more to empower Iran than the other way around. Israel does more to create instability. I mean, they're right now bombing Lebanon, bombing Syria. They're making threats against Iraq. They're threatening to restart the war against Iran. And we're going to have an Abrahamic Accords agreement with Kazakhstan? Oh, that's great. Borat is probably really happy right now. It gives him new life. But yeah, I mean, it's just nonsense talk. The reality is, like I said, Israel's more of a liability than an asset. And the more of a liability they become, the more money we put into it in order to make them feel more secure, which emboldens them to do more stupid stuff, which means that they get more at risk. And it's like we're feeding this thing. The only people that benefit, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, I mean, they're doing real, Boeing, these guys are doing great. They love it. Testing weapons and showing how they work. But the politics don't work because Israel's been fighting this ragtag group of people in Gaza, literally ragtag group of people whose most sophisticated weapons were tin cans that they threw across a border that did nothing and had no accuracy at all. They had the most sophisticated army and machinery in the world, and they're still doing it, but they're going to liquidate them. And Trump's saying, and if you don't stop, we're going to turn the Israelis loose on you. What did you call the last 2.5 years? That was not turning, I mean, so, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a need for a reassessment, and it's got to involve new thinking about this. It can't be that stuff. Yeah. Give the guy the mic. Sorry, Willem.
Thanks for your discussion. I'm John. I saw this card that I thought was pretty informative here.
Yeah.
Showing the loss of land, the Palestinians' loss of land. And to me, I'm wondering your thoughts here. I mean, we've seen this movie before. This was the American, this is our American Manifest Destiny. But I'm wondering, it seems like this conflict, if you really wanted to boil it down, it's a conflict over real estate. And so, you know, how can you come to some sort of can we come to some sort of solution that involves some sort of balancing of real estate interests so that you actually have a group of people that have a chance to prosper? I'm wondering your thoughts there.
I'm going to answer the question, but I'm also going to suggest that you look up a book I wrote in 1978 called Palestinians, the Invisible Victims, Zionism and the Problem of Palestinian Human Rights. That's the subtitle. I can give it to you later. In which I make the following observations. One is that in its origins, I mean, in the beginning of the Zionist debate, there were multiple schools of thought. There was a Martin Buber, there was an Ahad Ha'am, there was a cultural Zionism, there was a religious Zionism. There was a sense we have an attachment to the land. There's no doubt we do. It's spiritual or cultural. And both of those schools largely taught that it would be good for Jews to move there and partner with the people in that land to build a society for all. That's how Buber's famous book, I and Thou, about seeing the other as you, was an important statement in that direction. The one that won, the school of thought that won, was political Zionism, that was an exclusivist ideology, that it's ours, nobody else's, and had a kind of a biblical messianic. So when Netanyahu said after October 7th, made references to the Amalek, his folks knew what he was talking about, which was extermination. Those who were part of that school of thought knew what he was talking about. Is he himself a true believer? I don't know. I mean, I think he's a survivalist more than anything. But the idea of being exclusivist, of being absolutist. I called Netanyahu one time during the Clinton administration, I called him a malignant maneuverer. I'm not sure he had an ideology that he was firmly committed to as much as he was a good maneuverer, but there was this malign element in his personality. So when Clinton would tell him, you can actually do this, you can actually take the next step on peace, Netanyahu would say, I lose my government. Clinton had a conversation with me one time. He said, Netanyahu said he'd lose his government. What do you think? And I said, no, I think he'd actually add 19 people. And Clinton said, I was trying to convince him he'd add 23. And one of Clinton's aides came to me afterwards. He says he knows every person in the Knesset, how they'll vote on anything. He was just masterful at this stuff. And the reality is that Netanyahu could end the war and keep in a government because the ones he'd lose, yes, but he'd pick up other people from the center right. He's unwilling to do that because there's this malignant ideology. He's still the son of his father, who was one of these absolutists, one of these ideologues on the exclusive Jewish right to the homeland. So that's a problem in Israel. And I'm sorry, I don't remember where the question was going, but the real estate, it is, I think, for them, it's not so much real estate as it's a kind of like a biblical mandate, an ideology, a religious belief that this is all ours and no one else's. And whether they themselves are religious or whether they see it as a political tool to keep these folks in line, I can't peer into Netanyahu's soul and know how religious a person he is. But are there compromises possible? Of course, there have always been compromises possible. But when you have people like these hilltop youth in the West Bank, the extremist young settlers, they're in this cult of they've turned their faith into a cult, an absolutist cult that sees no place for anybody else. Everyone is a stranger who should be expelled. Everyone is the same. They're the people that Joshua destroyed in Jericho. They're the people, the Canaanites, who, God mandated that their pregnant women be killed and their bellies opened and babies, that they see that. That's how they feel. And they use excessive violence because that's where they are. It's not so much a piece of real estate as much as it's fulfilling the cultic mandate. The same problem exists, of course, on the Arab side among some who have the same kind of cultic view. But could right reason prevail? Yeah, it could. But what has to happen is that there has to be a radical transformation in the politics of the region so that tendency to be absolutist diminishes in the face of a majority that feels the other way. Right now, it's not there. It's not there. Yeah.
Dr. Zogby, could you say a word about the role of Christian Zionism in the United States, the role they play in influencing policy?
Bad. Do I have to say more? No, okay. You said a word. I was giving you a word. No, I think that that's the same thing. I mean, I'm not convinced that the folks who used to listen to Pat Robertson are actually counting down the days for the end of the world. When Pat Robertson would go to the blackboard that he had, and these are the nations of Gog and the nations of Magog, and they're going to come, and the end of the world is at hand, and Jesus is going to come in the select 144,000, and the rest are. I'm not sure that was a motivating force for most of them. I mean, there's this interesting phenomenon in religion that people go to a Charlie Kirk rally and cheer and cry when his wife says, I follow the biblical mandate that says forgive. And they feel so gratified that this woman is doing what she does. And then literally minutes later, Donald Trump says, I don't forgive them, I hate them. And they stand up and cheer again. There's something going on there. And that's the case among Palestinians, it's the case among Israelis, it's the case among the Christian right here. These are the ones who will rant and rave about morality and about, the sacredness of marriage, and they vote for Donald Trump. Doesn't exactly share that view. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's lots of contradictions in there. So what religion becomes, whether it's Zionist or Christian or Muslim, is it's language that gets used to justify certain actions of behavior, not so much that they're believed as much as they validate what you want to validate. And that's kind of where, where I think is, I was never convinced that Christian Zionists actually look forward to the end of the world. I don't think so. I don't think anybody really does, It's like, oh God, I hope I die. I really want to, and not I want to die, but I want everyone else to die too. I want the whole thing to blow up. You got to be pretty goddamn sick, right? But so I'm not sure that that's, as much as it is a cover that language I use, when somebody says they hit their thumb when they're pounding a nail and they say, God damn, I say, oh, you're a religious person. I didn't know that. Or you give somebody a present, they get excited and they say, Jesus Christ. So, oh, you believe in him too. No, you know what I mean? It's like language, religious language is evocative language that describes something in a way that is very powerful for you, but it's not what you mean. And so, when they talk about the final days, there's something else going on there than, it's a longer issue, but I write about it, so you want to get my columns. Everybody signed a call-in sheet, a sign-in sheet. If you did, I could give you my email. I'm going to write to you and see if you want to get added to my column list to get my weekly columns. And if you don't, I won't send them to you. Or if you want to unsubscribe, you can do that too. Or if you just want to make sure I get it, I'll give you my email. It's JZOGBY, my first initial, last name, JZOGBY at AAI, that's the name of my group, AAIUSA.org. Zogby at AAIUSA.org. Thank you. Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming to Iowa and speaking to us. My question to you, Dr. Zogby, is about the United Nations, your opinion on what the Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, said last time when the United Nations recognized the state of Palestine. He said that was crazy, and who is the United Nations to recognize Palestine, even though he knows that the United Nations recognized Israel in 1949 as a member, of the United Nations. So what is your view about the Security Council and that veto that keep defeating the world opinion on Palestine and keep helping Israel continue its crimes against the Palestinians? How can we defeat this veto? How can we change this veto?
I had a debate with a PLO guy in the late 90s before the Bethlehem Society. There's a fairly good-sized community of people from Bethlehem in the States. And he was going on about the defeats that they have at the UN, but we won this resolution 163-7 in the General Assembly, and it was very, but we took it to the Security Council and it was 14-1. So we're coming back in the fall with a new resolution, and this year we hope to get more votes. And when it was my turn to speak, I said the problem isn't whether you go from 163 to 165. The problem is that one vote. And that will only change when we change America. We have to change American politics on this issue. And the Palestinians, I have to say, have been sorely lacking in a strategy to engage American public opinion. It's not, they say, you're not doing anything. And I say, you're doing less than nothing. They have a responsibility to engage here in the same way the Israelis do. I remember saying one time, Benjamin Netanyahu was on a trip. Saw it in the Washington Jewish Week. He came to the U.S. and he went to Memphis and a bunch of other cities, Birmingham, in that area around in the South. And somebody said to me, "Why is he doing that?" And I said, "Well, because there's people, and two, there's a media market that reaches even more people, and it matters to them to get their narrative out and told." I said, "When was the last time a Palestinian official came and did the same thing?" No answer. You know, I mean, we can do it as American citizens, as Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans can do it. You all can do it, but it'd be helpful if they added to it. Thank God now we're not alone in this. It's not just the Arab guys like it was in the 70s, me doing it with maybe there was a Don Will from the Methodist Church and somebody else from the Fellowship of Reconciliation. It was like a handful of us from some of the Christian churches and us. But it's now bigger. But we need a strategy on how to change America so that we get a president who doesn't veto. Because the UN has been reduced to, I said it yesterday, and some woman who headed the United Nations Association got mad at me. I said the UN's been reduced to a joke. And I don't mean to disparage the UN as much as it just can't do anything because the US blocks everything. Or if it's something the Russians don't want, they block it, you know, but there is no will. I went to an event one time with a politician, and baby started to cry, and he stopped his speech and he said, "Would somebody shut that kid up?" And I said to my brother who was with me, I said, "He's not going anywhere, this guy. Yeah. You're supposed to kiss him, buddy, not tell parents to shut up." But we have 5 kids, my wife and I, and we had 13 grandkids, so I kind of like baby sounds. It's the noise they make. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark, and you just said a few minutes ago.
Wait, did I handle that? Okay, yeah.
Maybe you just answered part of this, but you said there needs to be a radical transformation in the political reality in the region, but it can't come from within the region. But is there enough international pressure? Do you see that reality growing in the international community?
It's growing here. It's growing here, and it's growing in public opinion in other countries too. But at the end of the day, this still remains the country that makes the big difference. I mean, I talked to somebody today about the UN vote coming up. There's a UN vote where Trump is trying to ram his peace plan down the throat of the Security Council so they will codify it in international law. It would be a death sentence for justice if that happens. It will be a huge hurdle to overcome. And he said, you will not believe the threats that they're making to other countries. And that some other countries on the Security Council are saying, maybe, you know, if you did this, they're using it as leverage. Oh, sorry. They're using it as leverage. So if you get rid of tariffs, maybe we'll, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, the threat and the power of the U.S. remains a huge factor in international politics. So radical change, yeah, it's got to, but the radical change has to come here. It's our job. And we got 3 years to figure out how to how to do it. I think we can actually make a big dent next year in the congressional elections if we put the fear of the Lord in some folks. But I find it interesting. Not always. I'm not quite sure what to do with Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson or some of these guys. I don't know. I'm not like going woo whatever, because they used to be the anti-Semites for Israel. Now they're just anti-Semites. And I'm not comfortable with that. But there is, in other words, there's something happening on the right that also factors into this. And I know in our polling that among evangelicals, for example, evangelical youth have radically different ideas than than their parents on Israel-Palestine. They're caught up in the same global awareness culture as their counterparts in the non-evangelical community. So there's change. The question is, it needs to be harnessed into politics to make change in, just change in people's feelings is great, but that has to be changed into people's behavior and in politics. And I think it's coming, but we still have a ways to go. Anything else? Yeah. And then he's the last one, I think. Oh, where? Who? Oh, you, okay. You, yeah.
What strategies of symbolic protest in regards to this conflict do you think has been effective and could in the future be effective? Because you know, the direct carnage on people's screens doesn't get through to people enough to change the political winds. And we have had a strong pro-Palestine movement in this country, including in Des Moines, including with Catholic Peace Ministry. And I'm a Catholic worker here in Des Moines, and so I come from a tradition of that, but that's only one tradition.
By the way, I loved Catholic Worker. Sorry.
Come
I was at Lemoyne College. I did my undergrad at Lemoyne College, and Daniel Berrigan was there. And it was this, there. Sorry, yes. Thank you. Yeah. And I was asked to give the initial Berrigan lecture at Lemoyne College when I graduated. Oh, at the college I graduated from, yeah. They started about 7, 8 years ago. Sorry, yes, sorry,
No,
that was a...
But yeah, just I believe there's a need to not just scale up how many people are protesting, but the ways in which creatively we are protesting.
Yeah.
But I'm stumped as to what that could be.
Yeah, I don't know if I could have a discussion on tactics right now. I will tell you that the demonstrations that have been the most powerful have been the Jewish Voice for Peace ones. When you have 500 young Jews saying "not in our name" with shirts on in the Capitol Rotunda, sitting down, or in Grand Central Station or Union Station, that's really powerful stuff. I've seen other mass protests that have been, I think, compelling. Not just on this issue, but the way the bishops have, in wanting to bring sacraments to the people held in ICE captivity. There are, I think, creative things that can be done that sort of challenge the conscience of people. But the protest that I think is the most significant is beating somebody on election day. I mean, that's where the change has to come, is do we register enough voters? Do we get them out to vote? Do we make the issue matter? And do we put the fear of the Lord in people? That's I think, what's the one right now. But if you want to do this more, write to me. I gave you the email, and I'd like to give it to some other folks I know in the movement to have some ideas coming back at you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Make it good. No, I'm sorry.
I will try. I will try. Thank you for coming back to Iowa.
Thank you for having me back in Iowa. I love being here.
All right. My name is Lee Tesdell. My question about the Oslo and what your is and how essentially they failed in the long run. But I would also like to mention that my parents, both from Iowa, in 49, late 49, worked there until early, with the Quakers. They were, you may know that the Quakers administered the camps in Iraq.
Yep.
It came in
They were also to be the administrators for the International City of Jerusalem.
Really?
And that didn't happen, unfortunately. Yeah.
All right. So we grew up with the stories. So.
Yeah.
So the question is about Oslo Accords. I've heard that the Palestinians didn't have good maps. I've heard, Edward Said and Ibrahim Abu-Lughod were quite opposed to the outcome, and so on. What is your analysis? What happened there? And essentially, I guess you could.
Edward and I and Brahim Abu-Lughod had been very close. Brahim stayed close. Edward and I actually had a falling out over it, which broke my heart and was difficult. I supported Oslo. I did, and I felt that it was a workable approach. That if good faith had been if there had been good faith, could have led to an independent state. It unfortunately became clear early on that there wasn't good faith. I tried, had lots of fights in the administration, fights with people like Dennis Ross and Aaron Miller. My portfolio was to deal with the economic development stuff. It was very clear early on that Israel did not want to surrender franchises, that they didn't want to open Gaza or West Bank to external investment or the ability to export product. When after the massacre in the mosque in Hebron, the actions were not against the settlers, but were to establish closure in the West Bank and surround Jerusalem and make Jerusalem inaccessible. It was devastating to the Palestinian economy. Jerusalem was not just the city, it was the metropole. It was like Washington, D.C. and the Beltway, what it is to Maryland. And I mean, Washington, D.C. has a population of 600,000 people, like 1.5 million people work there. You come into the city for work, you come into the city for cultural life, you come into the city for social life, you come into the city for everything, right? That's what Jerusalem was to the West Bank. You cut it off. You literally cut the heart out of the West Bank. It wasn't just Jerusalem. It was 28 Palestinian villages that were put in this imaginary thing called East Jerusalem that the Israelis said is all ours, and they cut it off. So what happened was, I'd be staying at the Ambassador Hotel, and the night clerk had a PhD in psychology. He was a clinical psychologist. But his clientele were all in the West Bank. They couldn't come in. Ron Brown, the Secretary of Commerce, came to talk about investment, and we had a group of Palestinians from the whole West Bank coming. 15 minutes into his talk, they got up and left. And Ron turned to me and he said, did I say something wrong? Can you find out what happened? I went out. They had gotten a 2-hour pass to come through the checkpoint to see the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. They were afraid if they didn't leave then, they would not get back in time and they would not get the ability to get passes to come into Jerusalem again. I went with Jesse Jackson in 94. Excuse me, it was April of 94, just 6 months or so after. And he wanted to do a conference supporting peace at the Ambassador Hotel. The Israeli military surrounded the hotel and said they would not let anyone come. And he, being Jesse Jackson, led a march through the lines over to Orient House. The Israelis were furious with him. What was absolutely adorable to watch, though, were the young Israeli soldiers wanting to get out of line to get their pictures taken with Jesse Jackson. They were so riveted on the fact that he was there. But yeah, there was no goodwill at all. And I remember when I landed on our first delegation visit, I was looking the northern part of Jerusalem, the outskirts. There was construction, massive construction going up. And part of not Oslo, but part of Madrid, was that the Israelis agreed to a settlement freeze if the Arabs would get rid of the secondary boycott. And so I got there and I looked at the skyline of when we landed at the airport, I looked at the skyline of Tel Aviv, and it was like Sanyo and, you know, all these Korean and Japanese companies. And they said, yeah, they're all here now because of the secondary boycotts. But then I saw this construction going up. And I wrote this article about literally a concrete wall of buildings going up surrounding Jerusalem. This is before they actually built the wall. And I said to the Israeli who was in the car, I said, these are new settlements. He said, no, that's just an extension of this other settlement, you know, which made about as much sense as, you know, I'm trying to think of something and nothing's coming. But, you know, it was like settlement was here, the construction's going on here, but this was an extension of it. No, it was a new settlement development. So it was very clear but the fault of us, or what happened in Oslo, was that the U.S. did not do a damn thing. I wrote a letter to Clinton, and I saw Clinton, and he said, how's it going? And I told him that we had a list of 16 impediments to economic growth, things the Israelis were doing to stifle the Palestinian economy. He said, that pisses me off. He said, you got to write that down and send it to me. So I wrote the letter, and a guy who worked in the National Security Council, I told him, I said, I sent this letter to the president. He said, you just got gamed. I said, what do you mean? He said, you watch and see. So he sent me a copy of the letter that Clinton had circulated around National Security Council with my letter, and in the corner, Clinton writing, this has to be answered. We have to do something about this. Please get me your responses. He said, now watch and see what happens. About 3 weeks later, I get a letter from the White House. It's very nice envelope, you know, fancy paper. And it says, I've read your letter. I'm really disturbed, but let me tell you the following. And then it was Dennis Ross, Aaron Miller, Martin Indyk writing their responses. I did a paper at a conference at Bard College on the presidency, and I called it I said the president is not the captain of the team, he's the captive of the team. Because he gives instructions to people who carry it out through the filter of what they want to do or don't want to do, and then he gets back information from them who tell him what they want to tell him. He didn't have eyes and ears on the ground. He's dependent upon these goons to tell him what was going on. And so the situation never got corrected. I lost faith in the process. I did, I admit. We had disbanded it after a few years. But, yeah, Oslo could have worked, but for it to work, the U.S. had to crack the whip. And the whip only got applied to the Palestinians. They got all the there was asymmetry of power. Israel had the power, Arabs had none. But there was another asymmetry. Israel got praise, Palestinians got pressure. And that was the nature of the beast, and still is. Thank you all very much.